Marcus adjusted his tie nervously as he approached the gleaming glass facade of Hartwell Contemporary. The gallery's name blazed in elegant silver letters across floor-to-ceiling windows, and through them he could see his older brother Vincent holding court among well-dressed patrons sipping champagne. This was Vincent's moment, his first solo gallery opening as owner-operator, featuring what he'd pompously dubbed the new Vanguard, revolutionary contemporary expression. At 28, Marcus had grown accustomed to being overshadowed. Where Vincent was loud and self-promoting, Marcus was quiet and methodical. Where Vincent networked aggressively in the art world's social circles, Marcus spent his evenings in his converted garage studio, working on what the family dismissively called his little projects. Their parents, both retired professors, had always favored Vincent's flashy approach to art curation over Marcus's patient, meticulous practice as a sculptor and installation artist. "There's my baby brother." Vincent's voice boomed across the gallery as Marcus entered. The crowd turned to look and Marcus felt the familiar flush of embarrassment. "Everyone, this is Marcus. He does art too, though nothing quite ready for professional exhibition yet." The gathered collectors and critics chuckled politely, their attention already drifting back to Vincent's carefully curated wall pieces. Their mother, Eleanor, materialized beside them wearing her most patronizing smile. "Marcus, how lovely that you could take time away from your hobby to support Vincent's career milestone. Perhaps being here will inspire you to take your art more seriously." She gestured toward a particularly garish abstract painting priced at $15,000. "See how real artists present their work. Professional framing, proper lighting, serious pricing." Marcus nodded quietly, his hands clasped behind his back. He'd learned long ago that defending his work only invited more condescension. Instead, he listened as Vincent regaled a group of potential buyers with stories about his artistic vision and revolutionary curatorial approach. The truth was that Vincent's gallery primarily showcased derivative works by his art school connections, competent but unremarkable pieces that followed current trends rather than breaking new ground. "The thing about Marcus," Vincent continued, apparently unable to resist another dig, "is that he's never understood the business side of art. He gives away pieces, works with community centers, does those installation things in public parks. Sweet, really, but not exactly the path to artistic legitimacy." The crowd murmured agreement, and Marcus felt his father's disapproving gaze from across the room. Dr. Richard Hartwell had spent decades building the family's reputation in academic circles, and he'd made it clear that Vincent's gallery represented the kind of cultural achievement the Hartwell name deserved. Marcus's community-based practice, with its focus on accessible public art and social engagement, struck his father as embarrassingly populist. "Art should elevate society," he'd often lecture Marcus, "not pander to the masses." As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself increasingly isolated. Gallery patrons who'd initially approached him with polite interest quickly excused themselves once they learned he wasn't showing work in the space. His Aunt Helen, Vincent's most vocal supporter, made a point of loudly praising Vincent's sophisticated collector base, while casting meaningful glances in Marcus's direction. The message was clear. This was what success looked like, and Marcus's approach was a deviation from family expectations. Vincent cornered Marcus near a wine station, his confidence buoyed by the evening's positive reception. "Look, I know tonight might be hard for you," he said with practiced magnanimity, "seeing what professional success actually means. But hey, maybe this will motivate you to finally get serious about your career. I could probably find wall space for one of your smaller pieces. Maybe price it around $200, see if anyone bites." The offer was delivered as generosity, but Marcus recognized it as another form of diminishment. Everything about the evening reinforced the family's narrative. Vincent was the legitimate artist building a real career, while Marcus remained stuck in amateur hobbyism, too naive or stubborn to understand how the art world actually functioned. The gallery opening continued around Marcus like a carefully orchestrated performance designed to highlight his inadequacy. Vincent's art school friends dominated conversations with insider terminology and name-dropping, while their parents circulated among guests, proudly introducing Vincent as "our son," the gallery owner, and Marcus as simply "our other son." The distinction wasn't subtle. "Marcus, darling, when are you going to have a real exhibition?" asked family friend Margaret Thornfield, her voice carrying the particular brand of concern wealthy women reserve for disappointing relatives. Vincent has worked so hard to establish himself properly. Surely you could follow his example and submit your work to legitimate venues instead of those public installations. Marcus sipped his wine and watched Vincent demonstrate his curation philosophy to a cluster of collectors. His brother had always possessed an instinct for performance, turning every conversation into theater. The key, Vincent proclaimed, is understanding that art isn't just about personal expression. It's about market positioning, cultural relevance, institutional validation. Some people never grasp that fundamental reality. Their cousin David, an investment banker who considered himself cultured because he owned 3 paintings, joined the conversation with characteristic bluntness. Honestly, Marcus, I don't understand why you waste time with that community art stuff. Vincent's approach makes sense. Build relationships with serious collectors, get your work into proper spaces, establish market value. Your way seems. He paused diplomatically, unchimerical. The criticism stung because it echoed doubts Marcus sometimes harbored about his own choices. While Vincent networked at gallery openings and art fairs, Marcus spent weekends teaching sculpture workshops at community centers and collaborating with neighborhood organizations on public installations. His work addressed issues like urban renewal, environmental justice, and community identity, themes his family considered politically naive and artistically limiting. The problem with idealism, his father had warned him repeatedly, is that it doesn't pay bills or build careers. Vincent understands that art is ultimately about cultural influence, and cultural influence requires institutional support. As if summoned by the family's collective focus on legitimacy, Vincent's mentor Professor Jonathan Blackwood arrived with considerable fanfare. Blackwood taught at the prestigious Meridian Institute and served on several museum acquisition committees. His presence immediately elevated the evening's importance, and Vincent glowed as Blackwood praised his sophisticated understanding of contemporary market dynamics. "This is exactly what emerging galleries should aspire to," Blackwood announced to the gathered crowd. Vincent represents a new generation of curator entrepreneurs who understand that artistic vision must be coupled with business acumen. Too many young artists waste energy on social practice work that lacks commercial viability or institutional recognition. Marcus felt the weight of implied criticism. His public installations and community collaborations were precisely the kind of social practice work Blackwood dismissed. Eleanor beamed as Blackwood continued his impromptu lecture on artistic legitimacy, occasionally glancing at Marcus as if to emphasize the lesson's relevance. "Real artistic achievement," Blackwood concluded, "requires validation from established institutions. Galleries like Vincent's, museum acquisitions, serious critical attention. These are the metrics that separate professional artists from hobbyists." The evening's accumulating dismissals created a familiar pattern Marcus recognized from family gatherings throughout his adult life. Vincent would be celebrated for meeting conventional expectations, while Marcus's alternative approach would be treated as evidence of immaturity or misguided idealism. The narrative had been established so thoroughly that even Marcus sometimes wondered if his family was right about his career choices. Vincent approached him again as the crowd began to thin, his earlier condescension now tinged with genuine concern. "Look, little brother, I know tonight's been a lot. Seeing professional success up close can be overwhelming. But I want to help. Maybe I could introduce you to some people, get you thinking about more commercial directions for your work. You've got talent, but you need to channel it more strategically." The offer represented Vincent's version of kindness, but it was predicated on Marcus abandoning everything that made his practice meaningful. His installations addressed real community needs and created spaces for collective dialogue about shared challenges. But explaining this to his family felt futile. They'd already decided that art without institutional validation was simply elaborate hobbyism. At precisely 9:30, as Vincent prepared to give his closing remarks to the remaining guests, 3 people entered the gallery with the kind of quiet authority that immediately shifted the room's energy. Marcus recognized Dr. Sarah Chin, Director of Contemporary Art at the Smithsonian Institution, from museum publications and art journals. The woman beside her wore the understated elegance of Federal Cultural Administration, while the third person carried the leather portfolio typical of institutional acquisition teams. Vincent's speech faltered mid-sentence as he processed their presence. Dr. Chen approached Marcus directly, extending her hand with professional warmth. "Mr. Hartwell, such a pleasure to finally meet you in person. Your Resilience Architecture series has generated tremendous excitement among our acquisition committee." The gallery fell silent. Vincent's champagne glass remained frozen halfway to his lips as Dr. Chen continued. "We've been following your work since the Detroit installation. The way you integrate community voices with sculptural permanence represents exactly the kind of socially engaged practice our contemporary art division wants to champion." Eleanor's face went pale as Dr. Chen turned to address the crowd. "I apologize for interrupting your evening, but we have an exciting announcement regarding the Smithsonian's new National Contemporary Collection initiative. Mr. Marcus Hartwell's work has been selected for a major acquisition, 12 pieces spanning his 5-year community installation practice." The woman from Cultural Administration stepped forward, opening her portfolio to reveal official documentation. The acquisition value is $12.4 million, making Mr. Hartwell one of the youngest artists ever to receive a major Smithsonian acquisition at this scale. "The formal announcement will be made tomorrow, but we wanted to deliver the news personally." Vincent's mentor Professor Blackwood nearly dropped his wine. "I'm sorry, did you say $12 million? For community installations?" Dr. Chen smiled with the confidence of institutional authority. "Mr. Hartwell's practice represents the future of American contemporary art, work that addresses urgent social questions while maintaining rigorous aesthetic standards. His displacement/belonging installation in Baltimore has been cited by the National Endowment for the Arts as a model for public engagement. The Detroit piece has been featured in 3 major international exhibitions." Marcus's father stared in shock as Dr. Chen detailed his son's professional achievements. The MacArthur Foundation included him on their Emerging Artists watch list. The Venice Biennale has requested a proposal for their 2026 edition. Harvard's Graduate School of Design wants him for a visiting professorship. "But we never heard about any of this," Eleanor whispered, her voice barely audible. "Mr. Hartwell prefers to let his work speak rather than self-promote," Dr. Chen explained. "But the art world has certainly taken notice. His approach to community-based practice has influenced policy discussions at the highest levels of cultural administration." The acquisition specialist opened another folder, revealing photographs of Marcus's installations alongside documentation of their critical reception. The Smithsonian's decision reflects a broader institutional commitment to supporting artists who expand the definition of contemporary practice beyond traditional gallery spaces. Vincent found his voice, though it came out as a croak. "Marcus, you never mentioned. How long has this been?" Dr. Chen answered for him. "We've been in discussions for 18 months. The formal evaluation process included site visits, community impact assessments, and extensive peer review. The unanimous recommendation was that Mr. Hartwell's work represents a defining voice of his generation." The Smithsonian team departed after arranging Marcus's visit to Washington for the formal acquisition ceremony, leaving behind a gallery full of stunned family members and guests. Vincent stood motionless beside his wall of $15,000 derivative paintings, while Professor Blackwood stared at the official documentation as if it might disappear. Eleanor approached Marcus with shaking hands. "Sweetheart, why didn't you tell us about all of this?" Marcus finished his wine with quiet satisfaction. "You never asked about my work, only criticized it. I saw no reason to defend achievements you'd already decided were worthless." Within weeks, the consequences of the family's years of dismissal became clear. Blackwood's influence evaporated once his public dismissal of Marcus's practice was reported in art news alongside the acquisition announcement. Vincent's gallery struggled as collectors questioned his curatorial judgment. How had he failed to recognize his own brother's significance? The family's social circle buzzed with embarrassing questions about their treatment of Marcus, while Dr. Chen's comments about his preference for substance over self-promotion made their favoritism toward Vincent look petty and shallow. Richard's academic colleagues began mentioning Marcus's achievements at conferences, highlighting the father's failure to recognize his son's accomplishments. Marcus moved forward with quiet dignity, accepting invitations to lecture at major universities and participating in prestigious international exhibitions. He maintained minimal contact with family members who had spent years diminishing his worth, focusing instead on expanding his practice with the Smithsonian's institutional support. The $12.4 million acquisition transformed not just Marcus's career but the art world's understanding of community-based practice. His former hobby had become a defining movement, while Vincent's gallery closed within a year, another casualty of an art world that ultimately rewards authentic vision over social performance. Marcus never gloated about his vindication. He simply continued creating work that mattered, leaving his family to reckon with their spectacular failure of recognition and respect.